A monster stepmother was today jailed for life for torturing, starving and beating a defenseless 6-year-old to death before mocking him as he begged for help and lay dying, as the pitiless father who forced him to live in hell was handed 21 years. Cowardly Emma Tustin refused to come into the dock to face justice for murdering terrified and helpless Arthur Labinjo Hughes by savagely shaking his head and slamming it against the walls, floor or both. Hours earlier she had attempted to kill by forcing him to drink a lethal salt slurry, but when that failed, she left him with injuries equivalent to a high-speed crash. It followed months of unimaginable suffering at the hands of the sadistic 32-year-old and the boy's father, Thomas Hughes, 29. Judge Mr. Justice Mark Well QC told Tustin the minimum term before her case is considered by a parole board is 29 years. If they do not decide to release her, she will spend the rest of her life in prison. Hughes will serve 2/3 of his term in custody before being released. Tustin and Hughes starved the youngster, force-fed him salt-laden dishes and made him to stand alone for more than 14 hours a day, in a degrading, punishing and hellish regime over the last painful months of his life. Throughout the trial Tustin showed no remorse, and Arthur's grandmother noted, the only pity she has shown is for herself. The sickened judge told Tustin, who has 4 children, 2 of whom were taken into care, "You are a manipulative woman who will tell any lie and shift blame onto anyone to save her own skin. You wanted Thomas Hughes so he could provide for you and your own children, but did not want to be troubled by Arthur any longer." Mr. Wall said Tustin's own children lived a perfectly happy normal life in that household while this appalling cruelty to Arthur was taking place. The less human he seemed to be, the more freedom you had to abuse him. The judge called Hughes' encouragement of his girlfriend's actions chilling, adding, "You were Arthur's father, in a position of trust and bore primary responsibility for protecting him. He was extremely vulnerable and you lied to his school in the last days of Arthur's life to protect both you and Ems Tustin. They lied to his school, and when it reopened on June 8 after lockdown, Arthur never returned." Mr. Wall said he had no doubt Arthur was regularly beaten by the pair, with Hughes deliberately researching pressure points to inflict maximum pain with minimum injury. He described the child as emaciated, with his ribs showing through his skin. Today Arthur's biological mother, Olivia Labinjo Hallcrow, 29, spoke of her torment at his death. Her statement was delivered by her mother, Madeline Hallcrow, who regularly paused after bursting into tears. "He was just a child, he had no one to talk to, no one to ask for help when he was scared and needed protecting the most," said Emsa Labinjo Hallcrow, who is serving 11 years in prison for killing her partner. "My son's bright blue, effervescent eyes lost their sparkle and they weren't smiling anymore. They took his sparkle and his naivety from him, and then they took him from this world. A child, my little love, defenseless, trusting and nothing but loving, was killed. His short life was stolen, he will never see another Christmas, another birthday." Today Boris Johnson said no child should ever suffer in the way Arthur did, and that there are questions that need to be answered over the case. A spokesman for Mr. Johnson said, "The Prime Minister found the details of this case deeply disturbing and his thoughts are with those who loved Arthur, and no child should ever suffer in the way that he did. It's clear there are questions that need to be answered to get to the bottom of how this happened. You'll be aware that a local child safeguarding practice review is underway to fully assess the circumstances surrounding Arthur's tragic death at the hands of those who should have been looking after him, and that review will look at local safeguarding, including police, children's social care, health and education professionals in the local area. We won't hesitate to take any action off the back of that review." He added that the government's manifesto had committed to a review of the children's social care system to make sure children and young people get the support they need. Tests revealed Arthur had been poisoned with salt in the hours before his collapse, while a post-mortem examination found the youngster had suffered about 130 separate injuries. Tustin admitted 2 counts of child cruelty during the harrowing trial in Coventry, including carrying out 3 assaults on the boy and also making him sit or stand in her hallway for up to 14 hours a day as part of a behavioral regime. She accepted making 200 audio recordings of Arthur, often crying and moaning during these punishments, claiming she did so only to send them to Hughes in order to demonstrate the boy's naughty behavior while he was absent. Some of these extracts have been played to the court, including one in which the boy can be heard saying "No one loves me," and another in which he cried "No one's gonna feed me." Hughes, in evidence, had alleged Tustin mentally abused and gaslighted him into complying with the punishing disciplinary regime, but also admitted lying to school staff who were checking on Arthur's progress during the first COVID lockdown. He previously said he had probably placed the couple's relationship above the welfare of his son. Tustin, who has accepted being cruel to Arthur on occasions and was pregnant with Hughes' unborn child at the time, has said she was disgusted and ashamed by her admitted behavior. But she callously claimed that Arthur's fatal head injury must have been self-inflicted, possibly caused by him throwing himself down the staircase in her hallway, and describing how she heard a bang and a crack. During her evidence, she said that just because medical experts had concluded Arthur's death had been caused by head trauma inflicted upon him by an adult, that doesn't make it true. During one audio clip recorded during the period when Arthur was being forced to stand like a statue near the front door for hour after hour, Tustin was heard loudly repeating "Do it, do it." On another recording, from more than a month before Arthur's murder, he could be heard screaming and moaning, "I'm scared, I'm scared." CCTV from an in-lounge camera captured Arthur on the morning before he was fatally injured, appearing to limp and cry, and struggling to fold up a duvet he had been given to sleep downstairs. During the trial, Mr. Henkin asked Tustin, "You are not a camp guard following the rules, are you? You relished policing Arthur, we can hear it in your voice." Arthur's murderer answered, "I did follow the rules. You don't hear anything in my voice. If you want to make suggestions, I can't stop you doing that, but that's not the case." Around 2 weeks before Arthur's death, Tustin recorded herself commanding Arthur to put his arms by his side. She agreed with Mr. Henkin that Arthur had been made to stand in a model posture likened in court to a soldier on guard outside Buckingham Palace. After Mr. Henkin said the recordings painted a picture of a child in utter distress, Tustin told the court, "I can hear that now, but when I was there I just thought he was acting like a baby. At the time, because of how much we had going on with Arthur, I didn't recognize it." Tustin, who was unclear as to when Arthur had last been given a treat like an ice cream or allowed to play outside, admitted she had been deliberately cruel but claimed her actions had left her feeling like absolute crap. Mr. Henkin also suggested Tustin had developed a hatred for Arthur and viewed him as an obstacle to her relationship with his father. The Crown's barrister put it to Tustin, "You subjected him to a campaign of appalling cruelty, didn't you? Day after day, taking multiple forms. Standing, being assaulted, restricting his food, restricting his drink, assaulting him. The list goes on." Although she disputed that Arthur had been denied drinks, Tustin told the jury, "Even though I knew it was cruel, I convinced myself that it had to be done." Yesterday it emerged that Tustin had already been attacked by inmates throwing salt at her while on remand at HMP Peterborough. An HMP Peterborough spokesman said, "We do not comment on individual prisoners." At a pre-trial hearing in April 2021, Tustin's barrister said her client had been receiving significant and substantial threats, although it is unclear if she was at the same prison at the time. Speaking at a hearing on April 15, Mary Pryor QC said, "She has had a significant deterioration in her mental health. There are significant difficulties for her in that she is currently housed in an environment where she is not receiving medication. And she is receiving substantial and real threats, and violence." Ms. Pryor said Tustin's legal team had done all we can to urge the prison authorities to make it plain to safeguard their client's health and well-being, including writing to the governor. She added, "There are weekly conferences and they consist almost entirely of an overwhelmed young lady who is receiving significant and substantial threats and minimal medication." Ms. Pryor told the presiding judge at the time, recorder of Birmingham Judge Melbourne Inman QC, she had felt it necessary to say it in open court because nothing is changing. Speaking at the time, Judge Inman said, "The prison estate, I know, are very good at maintaining medication and treatment for those in their care. All I would say is, if there are concerns and problems, the court should be kept informed and, if necessary, we can make inquiries to assist." That is not meant as a criticism of anybody, but, obviously, if matters of concern are raised with the court, we will do everything we can to assist, to make sure they are resolved.